Naafiri is a champion that has always confused me. Her win rate is pretty high and she seems really strong, but her play rate has always been kinda low. So for the next week, I'm gonna try to learn Naafiri in 3 steps. First, normal games, second, do some research, and third, play some ranked games to see how good she actually is. I'm doing this because I'm trying to learn every champion in the game so one day I can make the greatest Viego video ever. And since I'm new to mid lane, I made a new account so you can all follow along with my ranked journey. So what runes and builds should you go on Naafiri? Well, the main rune you go is First Strike for burst and because it scales really well. However, Electrocute is great for burst early game, Arcane Comet is good for poke, and Conquer is great for a Bruiser build, which I'll talk about later in this video. For your build, you usually rush Eclipse because if you land 1 Q, it'll automatically trigger the item's ability because your dogs will then also hit the target. After that, you usually go Profane Hydra into lethality items like Shirelda's Grudge and Edge of Night. For the Bruiser build, you want to go Black Cleaver, Spear of Shojin, and then Stride Breaker, and even though it sounds weird on Naafiri, it was actually a really fun build. Alright, on to some normal games. You see, with most champions, I kind of know what they do because I've played against them a bunch, but because I've only played against maybe 3 Naafiris since she came out, I was completely clueless. That being said, once I got a feel for her abilities, I actually started having a ball with this champion. Get it? A ball? Cause she's a dog? Anyway, since it was still the beginning of the challenge, for every good play I made destroying the enemy backline, I would get overconfident, try to fight someone I shouldn't have, and just die. But in just my first game, with the Nexus about to explode, I realized that as long as I just believe in myself, anything is possible. Okay, puns aside, I actually got off to a great start with Naafiri during these normal games. I quickly learned that her base damage is kind of insane, and if you poke the enemy down early, you can kind of just all in and kill them in lane. I also realized that, like most assassins, you are very good at roaming, especially with the extra movement speed you get from your ult. But unlike most other assassins, it was wild how much survivability this champion has. I mean, sure, I was 8-0 here at the start of this fight, but I got 2 shields, my dogs blocked skill shots, and your Q heals a ton on a pretty short cooldown. Also, in this game, I literally had every kill on my team for the first 12 kills, which was kind of ridiculous. And even in games where I wasn't like giga fed, it was still pretty easy to win 1v2s. This champion really feels like she has the stats of a Bruiser with the kit of an assassin, which is why I tried a Bruiser build for my last normal game. And let me tell you, the build felt perfect. Wait, that's a cat pun. Anyway, with my first day being pretty successful in my opinion, I decided to hop into ranked and see how I did. My goal for my first day of ranked was just to not die as often. Even though I was a monster in the mid and late game, I did have a bad habit of sometimes just playing too aggressively. Speaking of not dying, this is a perfect example of sometimes your dogs getting hit by skill shots, which can lead to you getting killed, even if you yourself dodged the skill shot. But no matter how much I tried to avoid death, sometimes death just finds you. I love it! But despite the super fed Evelyn, my team managed to win the game, and just like that, I started Gold 2. Unfortunately, this is when things got rough. Over the next few games, I would play super well, just for the worst possible thing to happen. I would go absolutely crazy on a champion I've only played for 4 hours, doing everything I could to save our dying base. Wait, I do fuck tons of damage. Quadra kill. Just to try to be a hero, die for no reason, and completely throw the game. My mental was definitely put to the test in these games. I mean, that's the face of a broken man right there. I just think my builds and playstyle were all over the place with Naafiri, with every build today being different from the last. I definitely needed a little more guidance on how to play Naafiri properly and carry, because I felt so close to being good, just something was missing. Despite these struggles though, I did manage to climb a little bit, and after these games I realized, I really love Naafiri. So I did some research on YouTube and here's what I found. 1. Use your dogs to block skill shots. They kind of do this on their own because they follow you around, but you can take it one step further. If you hit the enemy with your Q, your dogs will run at them and block skill shots. You can also bring your dogs back with your E to also dodge skill shots if the enemy's on top of you. 2. Play for picks. Your ult gives you a huge burst of movement speed, and even when behind, the damage and shielding you get is usually enough to kill most squishy champions. 3. Flanking is more important than most other assassins. This is because if anybody steps in front of your W, they actually block your gap closer, so you have to find angles where you can get a clear shot on the enemy carries. And 4, at level 3, you have an amazing all-in, especially if you've already poked down the enemy a little bit. The main combo is W in, Q, E behind them, and then Q again for a heal and execute. Obviously, don't do this if you're low, but usually it will get you a kill or at least a winning trade. After learning a bit more about Naafiri, I learned that Profane Hydra actually feels a little bit better than Eclipse to me. I mean, Eclipse is good for survivability and it's easy to activate with your Q, but the damage you get from a finished Profane Hydra is just so much better, especially considering you already have good survivability in your kit. Profane Hydra also gives you a lot of lethality early game, which can shred squishy targets. And with some early lethality, you're basically doing true damage to anyone who isn't building tank. Not to mention, the extra AoE damage from Profane Hydra can help you do a ton more damage in roams and early team fights if the enemy is clumped together. And once I found a build I liked, things just started falling into place. Holy fucking shit! What is that damage? I mean, what's the AD carry supposed to even do here? I wasn't even that fed this game. Anyway, I won pretty much every game today, and before I knew it, I was plat. Let's fucking go! Platinum! Honestly, well deserved after that game, inting my ass off right at the start. I continued this momentum into my next day, making confident and well-executed plays. And every time my lane got a little bit boring, I would roam bot and fetch myself a few more kills. I really was off to a great start today, which is why it made what happened next so much more surprising. After that first game of the day, I really started to struggle. It went through my wolves? Oh my gosh, I thought, oh. And even though I would have some decent scores, most of these kills would happen in garbage time when the game was pretty much already over, which actually made me more frustrated because I looked at my score and it was pretty good, so it was obviously my team's fault, right? No, during this time, I was just playing worse, and the tilt made me start making worse and worse plays. I was still improving on Naafiri mechanically, and I had the confidence in lane, and even had my fair share of pretty impressive plays like this 1v2 or a good roam here and there. But I was clearly frustrated and just not in the right headspace today after several losses and just bad games. And before I knew it, I got a warning that I was already about to demote from plat. Going into my next game, I needed a change, and so I decided to play the Bruiser build I tried on my first day of this challenge. It definitely took me a second to realize I had a lot less burst with this build, but the build felt so much better in prolonged fights, especially against fighters and tanks. Like I said before, Naafiri already has a lot of healing and shielding in her kit, so pair that with Bruiser's stats and damage items like Black Cleaver and Spear of Shojin, and she felt incredible. I even tried taking Naafiri top lane for a little bit because I thought her Q poke would do amazing against melee champions. But after playing a little bit of top lane, I realized that her early burst and roaming potential made her just a way better mid lane champion. But even in a suboptimal role, this build felt so strong. I'm definitely more used to Bruiser champions, and maybe just Bruiser items in general are broken, but once I finished Black Cleaver, it took Naafiri to a whole other level. The reason this build works so well is you spam abilities which increases Spear of Shojin damage, and you shred armor with your dogs and the bleed damage on your Q. But despite the nice synergies, it was still weird not having as much burst damage as before. I'm not saying I won every game with this build, I mean I did still lose sometimes. And I will say, one more negative is that it's way weaker early game. Lethality items like Serrated Dirk and Brutalizer spike way harder early game, along with Electrocute and Arcane Comet. But once you finish Black Cleaver, you start winning 1v1s pretty easily. I also think it's way less hit or miss than the Assassin build. With lethality, you really have to snowball early to win games, but the Bruiser build feels like it's always useful because of the Black Cleaver armor shred. And at the end of day 6, I was getting the hang of this build. And going into the final day, I was so much better with Naafiri in lane. Fuck you. And after playing the Bruiser build for a few days, I was a lot more comfortable with its damage and survivability, and just like that, I started winning games super easily. Oh yeah, I actually got autofilled jungle one game, but because when she was initially released, I thought she was gonna be a jungler anyway, I decided to give it a try. And it went pretty well. To be honest, I actually think she's a decent jungler with her W and ult for ganks and her Q to kill camps and heal up. It's just that her clear was surprisingly slow despite having pets and your Q basically being 2 abilities in 1. That being said though, I only played her jungle one time, so maybe I could get the clear faster with a little bit more practice. So give it a try if you want, it definitely can work. Ultimately, I had a lot of fun playing Naafiri, and I think she's a very strong champion. She has a ton of mobility, a ton of survivability, and she's honestly really strong at every stage of the game. Not to mention, it's hilarious watching your dogs shred people. She just feels so fluid. Her animations and combos flow really well together, and I think the player experience on this champion is honestly amazing. I'm actually pretty surprised she doesn't have a higher play rate. Anyway, for my final game, I decided to go lethality one last time, and oh my goodness is it strong. Like, Naafiri can easily go assassin or bruiser depending on the situation, and both builds are so strong. Which is another reason I'm surprised she isn't more popular. She can be played a couple of different ways to fit your playstyle or team comp. I will say though, with the assassin build, you have to play around your cooldowns a little bit more, and you can't just go all in like the bruiser build, which I learned the hard way. But yeah, in the end, I climbed quite a bit with this champion, even though my MMR was bad at the start. Hopefully you all enjoyed, and I'm gonna go play more Naafiri now.